What if law schools needed you more than you needed them? I know it sounds backwards because for years, the admissions process has felt like a one-way power dynamic. They had the rankings, they had the prestige, and they had the leverage, and you were supposed to be grateful just to get a spot on the waitlist. But something big is changing, and almost no one is talking about it yet. I'm not talking about LSAT format changes or another US News ranking shuffle. I'm talking about something structural. Law school is about to become significantly easier to get into, and it's got nothing to do with your resume or your personal statement or whether you joined a pre-law society in college. It's got to do with demographics. Let me explain. There's a phenomenon happening in the US economy called the demographic cliff. It's not a theory, it's simple math. Starting in 2008, during the financial crisis, families had fewer kids, a lot fewer, and that decline never bounced back. Even after the economy recovered, the birth rate stayed low. People delayed having children or didn't have them at all. Which brings us to today. Those babies born in 2008, they're now 17. They're finishing high school. They're applying to college. And in a couple of years, they're going to be considering law school. But the problem is, there just aren't enough of them to fill those law school seats. We're not talking about a dip of just 1 or 2% here. We're talking about a 20% drop in birth rates over a very short period. That is millions of students, millions of law school applicants who simply don't exist. Which means colleges today, and eventually law schools in a few years, are going to be competing for a smaller and smaller group of applicants. So let's break it down. Fewer kids in high school means fewer college students, fewer college grads, fewer law school applicants, and fewer people to fill expensive JD programs. Law schools haven't yet fully felt the pain, but they see it coming, and when it hits, it's going to hit fast. This is not speculation. This is already being tracked in models like the Higher Education Demand Index, which predicts massive enrollment declines starting next year and accelerating into the 2030s. The hardest hit groups are the very students most likely to apply to grad school. Bottom line, if you're applying to law school in the next 3 to 7 years, you're entering the system at a time when schools are seeing fewer applicants, shallower applicant pools, and more pressure to admit. That means you're not going to be competing with as many people, and schools are going to be less selective than they were 5-10 years ago, and you're more likely to get in and more likely to get scholarship money too. The best part is you don't need to do anything crazy or manipulative or unethical to take advantage of this shift. You've just got to understand what's happening and make smart decisions. This is a once-in-a-generation change, and you can use it to make law school cheaper, faster, and easier to access if you act now. Now, these law schools, they're still running the same programs. They're still hiring the same professors and still leasing buildings and paying staff. But fewer applicants means fewer tuition checks to keep it all going. They're going to have to adapt. And when they have to adapt, they do something they never used to do. They become more flexible, they become more generous, and they start asking you what they need to do to win your business. And that's the most important mindset shift you can have. Law schools are not gatekeepers anymore. They are competing over you. You are not just applying to them, they are selling to you. Quietly, subtly, but it's already started. If you're paying attention, you'll notice small signs of it everywhere. Application fee waivers, quicker turnaround admissions decisions, generous scholarship offers with no extra paperwork, optional essays becoming truly optional, and new programs popping up just to attract more applicants. Online JDs, part-time tracks, evening classes, dual degrees. This is all part of the same response to one unavoidable reality. They need students, and you are no longer one of 100,000 anonymous applicants begging to get in. You are the customer, and once you understand that, the entire admissions process starts to feel different, less intimidating, less confusing, and more like a strategic game you can play and win if you're willing to be intentional. And the best part is, you don't need to wait 10 years to benefit from this shift. It has already begun. Now let's talk about how this demographic cliff actually plays out inside law schools. Because it's one thing to say fewer applicants means it's easier to get in, but what does that really look like? What are the ripple effects? And most importantly, how can you use them to your advantage? First, you've got to understand the business model of law schools. Most of them are tuition dependent. That means the majority of their revenue comes from you, the student, paying tens of thousands of dollars a year. They're not getting rich off of football stadiums or billion-dollar endowments. In fact, outside of the top 14 law schools like Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, most of them are running a pretty tight ship. If enrollment drops, their budgets take a hit instantly. So when the number of applicants falls, they can't just accept fewer students and call it a day. They've got to protect their income, which means they have to fill every seat, even if it means bending the rules they used to enforce. So here's what that looks like in real life. Obviously, it's going to mean lower admission standards. When there are fewer applicants, schools become less picky. That means lower GPA cutoffs, lower LSAT cutoffs, more soft factors being weighed like admissions essays, and more leniency for imperfect transcripts, career changes, or gaps in your timeline. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to take just anybody. They've still got their rankings to protect, but the standards they used to enforce 5-10 years ago, they are already loosening. The second big change is bigger class sizes. Because this might be surprising, but when applications drop, schools might actually increase the number of students they admit. Because if you normally admit 300 students out of 3,000 applicants, and now you only have 2,000 applicants, your acceptance rate has to go up. But instead of cutting the class size down to 200, you would push it up to 325 or 350 to keep tuition dollars steady. And yes, that might affect student-faculty ratios or classroom space, but those are short-term trade-offs. For the school, survival matters more. And for you, that means more seats available, especially at mid-tier and lower-ranked schools. And now finally, let's get to the part that everybody loves, money. When competition drops, prices drop. That's just basic economics. So what do law schools do when they're fighting to attract top applicants? They offer them more money, more merit scholarships, more need-based aid, more diversity grants, more application fee waivers, and more willingness to match offers from competing schools. Some schools now even offer automatic merit scholarships if you hit a certain LSAT or GPA threshold. No essay, no extra forms, just a straight-up discount. Others might give you money for applying early or as part of a negotiation tactic if you mention another school's offer. Think about that for a second. In a market with fewer applicants, you can go from begging for aid to fielding multiple offers and playing those schools against each other like job recruiters competing for a star hire. That is exactly how you should treat it. Now, here's something you might not expect. Law schools are spending more, not less, on improving their programs. Why? Because with fewer applicants, they have to sell the experience. That means building flashy new law buildings, upgrading courtrooms and tech centers, hiring well-known professors and practitioners, launching centers for tech law, environmental law, human rights, and so on, and promoting student-first cultures and mentorship programs. The message here is clear. They are investing to attract you. It's not just about making it easier to apply. It's about making the school look irresistible once you do. So let's zoom out here. Law schools aren't panicking. They are preparing. They're modernizing their programs, they're widening their reach, and they're looking to sweeten the deal. And if you're paying attention, you can take full advantage of all of it. This is not the time to play small. This is the time to ask big questions. Could I get into a better school than I thought? Could I get more money than I assumed? Could I attend part-time or online or from another state? The answer to all three of those might be yes if you know where to look. Now let's get specific. This demographic cliff isn't going to hit every law school equally. Just like in any economic shift, some players lose big, some pivot and survive, and a few actually come out stronger. So the smart question isn't just, will law schools become easier to get into? It's, which schools will drop their standards the most and which ones will hold the line? The first and the most vulnerable are the lower ranked schools and the regional ones. These are going to get hit hardest because they run on thin margins. They are massively tuition dependent, meaning they don't have massive endowments or strong alumni networks to fall back on. They rely almost entirely on this year's tuition to pay the bills. So when applications drop, they panic and lower their standards. They're going to offer bigger scholarships, easier admissions, rolling decisions, and new part-time or online options. Their goal is survival. And that's not a knock on these schools. Some of them do great work, but the pressure is real. If they can't fill their class, they're going to risk budget cuts, layoffs, or even closing their doors altogether. Which means for you, if you apply to these schools, your odds go way up, and you're more likely to get scholarship money with less effort and be able to negotiate much more aggressively, even if you're not a top applicant. To put it simply, they need you more than you need them. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, we have the big names: Harvard, Yale, Stanford, NYU, Chicago, all T14, T6 that dominate the rankings year after year. And they're going to be fine. They have massive endowments, decades of prestige, strong job placement, and the ability to attract top applicants globally. Their name alone carries enough weight to fill their classes even in a downturn. So they're not really going to lower their standards much, if at all. But even here, there is some nuance, because while these schools may not relax overall admissions, you might see slightly weaker stats, more focus on diversity of background or experience, and more willingness to admit non-traditional applicants with compelling stories. So yes, they are still competitive, but even they aren't immune entirely. Their second tier or third tier programs like clinics, part-time tracks, regional campuses might loosen up a little bit to help boost their numbers, which means if you were just below the bar before, this could be your window. And if your LSAT's strong, you now have more negotiating power even at elite schools. Now, the sweet spot is the mid-tier law schools, and that's where things get really interesting, because that's the biggest opportunity. The schools ranked, say, 20 to 80, because they're big enough to be taken seriously, but not so elite that they're immune to market shifts. They've still got to fill their classes. They still care about LSAT medians and bar passage rates, and they still rely heavily on tuition, but they also want to protect their reputations, which means instead of admitting anyone, they're going to fight hard for strong applicants. And that's where the deals start happening. At mid-tier schools, we're already seeing scholarships for applicants just above their LSAT medians, automatic merit aid for certain GPA LSAT combos, and increased acceptance rates for early applicants. This means these schools might be easier to get into, but they still have strong reputations. So now that you understand the landscape, fewer applicants, schools under pressure, big shifts happening behind the scenes, let's talk about what you actually do with all that information. And that's where most people freeze. They hear the system is changing, but they have no idea how to respond. So they do what everybody else does: apply to 5 random schools, submit everything at the last second, and hope for the best. That is the wrong move. You don't want to be just another name in a big pile of applications. You want to be the applicant who gets in faster with more money and gets treated like someone they've got to lock down now. So let's talk through a smart step-by-step strategy for doing exactly that. First, you want to apply broadly, but not blindly. So don't apply to 15 random schools because you're panicking. Apply strategically across 3 categories. Reach schools where your LSAT and GPA are below the medians. These might be a long shot, but it's worth a try if the trends are playing in your favor. The second category is target schools where your numbers are around or slightly above their medians. These are your most likely admits. And third, you've got your safety schools where you are significantly above the medians. These are your leverage plays. You're probably getting in with significant scholarship money, which you can then use to negotiate elsewhere. This is how you build options, and options give you power. Even if you don't really want to attend your safety school, that offer is still a bargaining chip. Secondly, you want to apply early. The earlier you apply, the better your odds and the more scholarship money is available. At the beginning of the cycle, they still are trying to hit their LSAT medians and they're anxious to lock in strong applicants. By the end of the cycle, they've already spent most of their scholarship money and filled most of their class. So if you wait till the last second, you're basically fighting over scraps. So apply early and get the ball rolling. You'll stand out more, get decisions faster, and have more leverage to work with. Now let's talk about negotiation. Law schools expect you to negotiate. Of course, they're not going to say it. They'll never put it on their website. But behind the scenes, they know this is a competitive market and they are ready to make deals. Now here's how you do it. You get multiple offers in hand, compare them side by side, not just total dollars, but cost of living, duration, and any stipulations. Then You go back to your top choice school and say, School B offered me X thousand dollars. I'd love to attend your program, but the difference in aid is significant. Is there any way to increase my award? No need to be aggressive here, just be clear and professional. What often happens next is they somehow find extra money and they bump up your scholarship, or they cover fees that previously were not covered. Even $5,000, $10,000 makes a big difference. Over 3 years, that adds up. And again, they expect this. You're not being rude, you're being smart. Now, let's be brutally honest here. Nothing moves the needle more than your LSAT score. Not your major, not your essays, not even your GPA. Why? Because the LSAT is still the number one stat schools use to protect their rankings. So if you want more acceptances, better scholarship offers, more negotiation power, and access to higher ranked schools, your best bet is to improve your LSAT score by even a few points. I mean, think about this. A 164 might get you into a mid-tier school with no money. A 168 could get you a half-off scholarship. A 173 might land you a full ride and offers from T14 law schools. Same person, same background, just a better LSAT score. That's how powerful the LSAT is, especially in a shrinking market where schools are looking for any reason to boost their medians. And this is especially relevant if you need flexibility. Law schools are offering more online JDs, evening and part-time programs, and hybrid programs that let you stay in your city and still graduate with a JD. So if you're working full-time, have kids, or are changing careers, these programs could be perfect for you, and they come with another hidden benefit: less competition. Traditional full-time programs are still more saturated, but the flexible tracks, they're newer and they have fewer applicants, and schools want to grow them. So if you're even thinking about a part-time or online path, now is the best time in history to explore it. Finally, don't guess your way through this process. Use real data. You could use sites like LSAC, law school numbers, and school-specific 509 reports which show you LSAT and GPA medians, acceptance rates, scholarship distributions, employment outcomes, and the cost of attendance. You're going to want to spend at least a few hours reading these, given the importance of where you go to law school. They will let you immediately see where you stand and how far your score or your application needs to go to get where you want. Law school admissions is a high-stakes game, but it's a game with rules, and the more you know these rules, the more power you're going to have. Now let's talk about something that used to be considered second tier, but is now turning into a secret weapon. For decades, law school followed a strict formula. You quit your job, move to a new city, take on 6 figures of debt, and sit in a physical classroom 5 days a week, all of that to graduate 3 years later, hopefully with a job. That was the only path, and if you couldn't do that, you were out of luck. But that has changed fast. In the last few years, something surprising has happened. Flexibility has become a competitive advantage. Online JD programs are going mainstream. Online law school is not a joke anymore. For years, the ABA said, if you don't sit in a physical classroom for 3 years, you're not a real lawyer. But that was pre-pandemic thinking. Now, the ABA has opened the floodgates and relaxed their rules. They are approving more and more hybrid and fully online JD programs, and law schools are jumping on it. Schools like Syracuse, Southwestern, and even T14s like Georgetown are rolling out online and hybrid options. These are not fringe satellite campuses, but real JDs with full ABA accreditation. This means you can stay in your city, keep your job, avoid relocation costs, and learn from the same exact professors just via Zoom, and be able to take the bar exam just like a traditional grad. And if online doesn't feel right, but full-time isn't realistic, you've got a middle ground available to you as well: part-time and evening JDs. These used to be rare, but schools are now offering more and more of them because they want to tap into a new applicant base, including working professionals, parents, career changers, military vets, and first-gen students supporting families. These might take 4 years to complete instead of 3, but these let you keep your income and spread out your tuition while avoiding the pressure of quitting your entire life just to go back to school. And some of these programs even offer weekend-only classes literally designed for people who work 9 to 5. So if that's you, these programs are built for your reality. Now you might be wondering, is there a downside to these alternative options? And of course, to be real, there is always a trade-off. These options might offer you fewer networking opportunities, might be less respected by ultra-traditional law firms, and require more self-motivation and time management. But the question to ask is, what do you want law school to do for you? If your goal is a big law job at a Vault 10 law firm in New York City, maybe you're going to want to stick with the traditional path. But if your goal is to become a practicing lawyer in your state, avoid $200,000 of debt, and still support your family while you study, this is the golden age of non-traditional legal education. And if you're thinking, can I even do this? Yes, you absolutely can. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need a 180 LSAT. You need a plan, some strategy, and a willingness to explore options most people still don't even know exist. Now, everything we've talked about so far, the drop in applicants, the rise of online JDs, the scholarship wars, the loosening of admission standards, it all sounds great. But if you're smart, and I know you are, you're probably wondering, how long will this last? And the honest answer is, not forever. You're living in a rare moment of opportunity, a window of time where demand is falling, law schools are under pressure, and the system is tilted in your favor. But that window is going to close. Law schools will adjust. They're going to adapt. And once they've fully adjusted to the demographic cliff, a few things will start to happen. They're going to shrink class sizes, they'll merge or consolidate, they'll lean into AI and automation, and they'll target international students. In other words, this golden moment, it is not a permanent feature, it is a phase, and smart people are already taking advantage of it. Right now, the birth rate collapse from 2008 is driving the trends, but long-term, several forces could reverse this. Immigration policies might shift to bring in more students over the next 10 years, deferred applicants from pandemic years could return, college enrollment marketing will get more aggressive, and economic pressures might push more people towards graduate degrees to wait out a bad economy. So while the number of college-age people might stay low for a while, the number of people applying to law school could start climbing again. Even if it's slow, that upward trend will eventually tighten admissions again, especially at mid-tier and top-tier schools. Right now, the ABA and the US News rankings are in flux. They're being more flexible about online JDs, pass-fail grading, and even test-optional admissions. But that flexibility could tighten up again. For example, if bar passage rates drop, the ABA might increase its accreditation scrutiny. If employers push back on online JDs, schools might reprioritize in-person programs. And if US News tweaks their formula again, schools might go back to emphasizing LSAT and GPA above all else. This could lead to schools becoming more selective, not less, especially if they want to climb or defend their spot in the rankings. But right now, hardly anyone is talking about this demographic cliff. Most applicants are still thinking about what essay topic to pick, what their reach school is, and whether to take the LSAT in October or November. They're not thinking big picture, but they will. And once more applicants start hearing that law school is becoming easier to get into now, they're going to flood the market, which means the exact trends that are helping you right now will eventually disappear as more people jump in to take advantage. Supply goes up, competition increases, and leverage disappears. Of course, you'll still be able to apply, but the doors won't be swinging open quite as wide, and the scholarship money won't stretch as far. And let's forget demographics for a second. Ask yourself, where do you want to be 3 years from now? Because no matter what's happening in admissions, your time still matters. Every year you wait is a year that you're not building legal skills, you're not growing your network, you're not earning as an attorney, and you're not making progress toward the career you want. So yes, you can wait, but the cost of waiting might be more than you think. If you're even remotely interested in law school, this is the moment to act if you're going to act, because the combination of lower competition, higher incentives, and greater flexibility isn't just rare, it may never happen again in your lifetime. So this is it, a rare moment when the system bends in your favor. Fewer applicants, lower barriers, bigger scholarships, more options than ever. It won't last. You can wait and compete later, or move now while the door's still open. It's your call.